Hello and welcome, Breakthrough Success listeners. I'm your host, Mark Guberti, and this is the podcast where you'll learn how to achieve the breakthroughs you've been looking for in your business and life. If you want to grow your content brand, you'll definitely want to add my latest book, Content Marketing Secrets, to your reading list. This book will teach you how to create, promote, and optimize your content for growth and revenue. You can get your copy at Mark Guberti, that is Mark with a C. So markguberti.com/book. And now, let's dive right into the show. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Mark Guberti, and this is the podcast for entrepreneurs who are looking for the breakthrough for their businesses. Our work ethic will either make or break us. It's the foundation that determines how we take action and find solutions to our challenges. No matter what your work ethic looks like now, we can always use some sharpening, and you'll learn how to sharpen your work ethic in this episode. So today's guest is the best-selling author of the book, Leadership Step by Step. The leadership coach serves as an adjunct professor at NYU and workshop leader for the Columbia Business School. He's a columnist for Inc. magazine and founder of Spodek Academy. Today's guest for episode 98 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than Joshua Spodek. Joshua, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Glad to be here and looking forward to this.
And I'm looking forward to diving into this episode on work ethic. And I talked about some of the things that you do, but in our conversations and through your website, I mean, I've also seen that you've done 90,000 burpees, you've written 2,500 blog posts, swam across the Hudson River, finished 6 marathons, and you have 5 Ivy League degrees. So you have quite the work ethic. Why do you take it so seriously?
Well, yeah, I didn't always. I mean, I was just talking to my mom about this. I think I watched a lot of TV growing up. I had 2 sisters, and we were latchkey kids, so we'd come home, and it was really in college where things started coming together, where I started realizing the value, how much I enjoyed the outcome of getting things done. Like when I started college, the first couple of years, I was at a liberal arts college, and I was taking lots of different stuff. And then once I started liking physics, I was like, this is what I want to do. And the rewards are greater. I mean, I like pleasure. I like eating ice cream. I mean, I like the physical pleasure of it. But it's not like I look back at those easy things and say, wow, I'm really proud I ate that cookie. But the other achievements, the emotional reward lasts a lot longer. And I've found that that's more valuable for me in the long term.
And how exactly did you go about developing this work ethic? Because like I'm a runner, so I can understand the idea of like running a marathon and how much you have to do like to get there. But how do you go from like not running at all to running 6 marathons? But I mean, like that example I gave could apply to all the things you've done. So how have you developed your work ethic?
That's an interesting question, because it's not like I went back. If I went back, did I say, I would like to develop a work ethic? What should I do? I don't think it worked that way. I mean, there are some things. Playing in a competitive sport at the nationals level, you got a team that wants to play together to win. And so if you don't put the work in, you're not going to make the team. You're not going to stay on the team. You're not going to be in the big games. I think that was a big piece of it. Certainly wanting to continue studying at the graduate level, that's really hard to get. I mean, to understand some of the equations and things that we do, that's really tough. A lot of the more recent things, though, I think it's more like I'm doing a lot of experiments, a lot of behavioral experiments that I wish I had started earlier in life. And some of them don't work out, and I let them go, but some of them do work out. And the ones that do work out tend to be things where it takes work, like doing the burpees, which, by the way, I don't know how this is going to sound. You must have read an older post, because now I passed 100,000 in September.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's not that big of a deal anymore. And I'll tell you, there's this guy that I guess I influenced, and he's decided, he's younger than I am. I'm 46. He's early 30s, late 20s. And he has the idea that he wants to get 1 million burpees in his lifetime. And he's at 150,000 already. So he's well past me.
Wow.
I guess I can take credit for inspiring him to some degree, but I didn't do any of those burpees myself. He did all of his. So I've already been passed by.
And I do see that as a pattern where people inspire others. Like you have the motivational speaker who's inspiring the crowd, but in the end, it's you who are doing the work. I mean, you get inspired, but in the end, it's going to be you who does those burpees or writes those blog posts. But as we develop a work ethic, I mean, some people, they develop a work ethic, like let's say they're on top and like their athletic peak, their educational peak, or they're on top of their peak. And that's when some people slow down, but you haven't slowed down with your work ethic. So how have you been able to retain it?
It's really building on these things. Like, I'll tell you a couple examples. Like the burpees. The original start of that was I read an article in the New York Times where the writer asked a fitness expert or several fitness experts what would be the best exercise if you could only pick one. And one of them mentioned the burpee, and I'd never heard of it. And I don't know, I heard about it, and I was telling a friend about this article, and he and I just decided. I just said to him, let's do 10 burpees a day for 30 days. And people since then have said there's, I don't know, research into forming habits and stuff. I didn't know or care about any of that. I just felt like doing it. And while I was doing the burpees, I found, this was after I had decided, I think it was after my last marathon, or maybe it's my second to last marathon. And I was really, like, I knew I wasn't going to do any marathons anytime soon. What was I going to do to exercise instead? Because the sports, it's not so competitive when you get into your 40s, and it's hard to get on teams. And I'd been going to the gym down the block, but I knew that when it was raining, I wouldn't get to the gym, and it cost money, and I don't like to spend money on things that are unnecessary. And so suddenly the burpees was like, hey, this is really good exercise. This is what I'm looking for. It took away every excuse I could think of, because you can do it at home. You don't need any equipment. You can do it when you travel. And it stuck. I just said, I'm going to do these forever. And that was within the 30 days. And so that was 2011. And I just now started my 7th year. I didn't plan it. I just found this improves my life. I like physical fitness more than I like chocolate cake. And same with a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, is when I noticed that most of my garbage came from food packaging. And so I gave myself this little challenge of not eating packaged food for a week. And that one took a lot longer. It took me like 6 months before I could. At the beginning, I would eat only mainly fruits and vegetables. I could finish what was in my cupboard. And after 2.5 weeks of no food packaging, I went back up to a little bit of food packaging. And once I learned how to cook, my diet became more delicious, more convenient, cheaper, more community-based in terms of buying from local farms and having friends come over a lot more. And so before doing these little experiments, I would plan and think about things, or I'd read about research, but I wouldn't actually do these things. Once I started doing them, it's really cheap to try it out the first time. Cheap, I mean, not in terms of money, but in terms of resources. And like swimming across the Hudson, you just go do it. Most people have a river in their city. You could just go do it. I just did it. Or, I mean, I had the idea, and then I mentioned it to a friend, and he was like, let's go do it. And I think that the more that I do these things, discipline is such an important skill to learn and develop. People think you have to have discipline. You develop discipline by doing things that require discipline. It's a cycle. That if you do a little bit, you learn it, you can practice it more, and you practice it and you develop it more. And it keeps building on itself. And very few things have delivered in my life like discipline and diligence. And so it's picking up not because of the value of the hard work. It's picking up because of the results make my life better. And I'm not messing around like reading research and trying to figure things out and planning them all and analyzing things. I do it. If it works, I keep doing it sometimes more. If I don't, I don't.
It's really interesting how, like with the 10 burpees, it became a habit, and you did, 10 burpees, it doesn't take a lot of time to do that many, but as you do them over 30 days, it does become a habit. And like you doing more experiments like swimming across the Hudson River, definitely not on the top of my to-do list, but I could definitely relate to doing all these different experiments. But how do you determine like which experiment you'll do, and what have been some of the best ones for you?
Which ones to do, I'm not sure, because different things come across my path. Like the other day, some guy was over, he's a fitness trainer, and he was suggesting some fitness stuff, but my fitness stuff is pretty much what I want. So I'm not I'm not really looking for more there. I mean, I started with 10 burpees, but it's now a set in the morning, a set in the evening, and the burpees include a bunch of stretches and other calisthenics, mostly body weight. I also row and I do weightlifting. So, and it's only like a few kettlebells that I have, but anyway, the fitness stuff is pretty set. I guess it's when I find something in my life that I'm not sure how to make it a part of my life, but I value it, I look for something that can systematize it so that I make it automatic. Like writing in the blog, I write in my blog every day. That one, that's the king of them all. That's the one that probably started it. A friend of mine set up my blog, the WordPress for me. And when he was setting up, I asked him, how often do you post? And I said, is it Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Is it when you feel like it? And he looks at me and he says, every day. If you miss one day, you can miss two. If you miss two, it's all over.
That's true.
And I don't want to, it's valuable to me. It's a mode of expression. It's discipline. That's where the idea, that's how the burpees kicked in, is doing it not without breaking. Same with the taking cold showers. It's easier mentally just to do them every day and never think twice about it than it is to start and stop. And then it's, how do I put it? Like the fitness ones, they burn calories and they build muscle. That's really cool. But the really hard part is starting the burpees every day. And if I just make it so that I don't have to think twice about it, then it's simply an automatic thing. And the reason why you said congratulations when I said 100,000, but I used to like touting the achievement. And when I'm posting it online, I try to get people's attention. So I want to say like, oh, this is really cool. But increasingly, around 100,000, it's more and more like brushing my teeth. That is, I can't think of going to sleep without brushing my teeth. I mean, do you have any idea when the last time you went to sleep without brushing your teeth was?
No, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, would you hang out with people who didn't brush their teeth every day?
Probably not.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, but I don't think about it. I'm not like, congratulations, you brush your teeth like every day for the past, I don't know, it's probably been like 40 years since the last time I didn't brush my teeth. And it's not something to be proud of. It's a value that you live by, and you wouldn't think of doing it another way. You feel uncomfortable not doing that. And that's how burpees are. They burn a lot more calories than brushing my teeth. And that's my work ethic is what's valuable? How do I make that work for me without thinking about it? And then I just do it. Oh yeah, here's the most recent one that I picked up is I pick up one piece of trash per day, at least when I'm walking around the streets of New York or wherever I am. So this morning I went to meet someone for coffee. On the way there, there was a lot of garbage out today. So I picked up like 3 pieces today. And now it's kind of weird to pass by garbage. And like I look at it, I'm like, I can't believe how much litter there is. It partly brings me down, but partly brings me up. It motivates me because of, I'm starting my podcast on leadership in the environment, and behavior is a big piece of leadership. So it gets me doing something. It makes me more aware. It gives me something that I can share with others. But when others say it's too hard, I can say, wait, it's like, it takes less than a second to pick up a piece of trash. I don't know if I'm answering your question or just kind of talking about this stuff.
No, you definitely answered the question because it's just an emphasis of how like actions like this can have a big impact. How like something as small as picking up a piece of trash. I mean, that's 365 pieces of trash every year that are not in the streets. And I really found it interesting when you said that your burpees, like you kind of view it similar to how someone like brushes their teeth. Like someone like an outsider was like, wow, 100,000 burpees. Like what I just did, like that's incredible. But you've done it so much. It's something as routine as brushing your teeth. And is there anything more to that than just like doing it every day and building that discipline? Or is there a little more that you have to do to make something like doing that many burpees as like, oh, I brushed my teeth, like, oh, I just did burpees in that same sense?
It's a nonstop voyage of self-discovery. I mean, when you do the same thing every day, it doesn't get boring. I mean, I guess if you do something boring every day, but physical fitness is like you're constantly paying attention to your body. Like, how do you do it? Yeah, you know how I knew that I didn't start it after my last marathon? Because the last marathon I did, I had to do my burpees after it. And doing that was, at that time I was doing 50 burpees a day. So I had to do, after running 26.2 miles, I still had to do 50 burpees. So now every time I ever do burpees after that, if I'm drunk, if I'm tired, if I've just been traveling, whatever, I can always say to myself, is this the hardest I've ever done? No, after the marathon was harder, so I can do it. So that's one thing. Another thing is my business is teaching and coaching leadership and entrepreneurship, and there's a lot of self-motivation involved there that a lot of people don't have. And that's not to say they can develop it. And so it's very useful for me. The same way if you had a fitness trainer, you'd want the fitness trainer to be fit. And because it's hard to get fit. And so it's not hard to stay fit. It's actually not hard to be fit, but it does take some effort. And I have to develop those things. I want to know what works. So for example, I used to, up until recently, for 6 years, for like 5.5, 6 years, when I would do my burpees, sometimes I would stand there ready to start, and tell me if this sounds familiar. I'd say to myself, okay, ready, go. And I wouldn't go. So I'd say, all right, okay, now go. And then I wouldn't go. And I'd go, okay, now go. And sometimes like 5-10 minutes would pass with me just standing there. And I kept telling myself, I got to work on how to start these things without all this standing around. And actually one time, this ex-girlfriend, she would do burpees too. And one time she's standing there, she's ready to get started. And I know what's going through her head. She's like taking a minute or two to get started. And what's going through her head is the same thing that goes through everyone's head. It's like, all right, I'll start now. Oh, maybe I'll do them later. Oh, I don't really want to do this. Oh man, do I have to do this? Yeah, I got to do it. You know that inner monologue stuff.
Yeah.
And so I just said to her, kind of devious, like, she's standing there ready to go. And I just go, oh, you can do them tomorrow. Oh, you've had a hard enough day. Don't bother. And it's kind of funny, when you're thinking something and someone speaks your mind, even though you didn't, you think that it's just you, but, they know what's going through your head too. And so she laughed and then just started her burpees, because she was like, oh, it's when you voice those concerns actually out loud, it's you don't take it seriously. But when you hear it inside, it's enough because you don't want to do it. Anyway, a little while ago, I had this idea to do it on the next inhalation. So, your breath is always there. You don't need a clock. You don't need a timer. I don't like to use external stuff. And so I just noticed that if I would just say, okay, next inhale, before I exhale again, I'll start. And it's worked.
Wow.
Like, I just go there and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And I go, and I'm like, oh, I can hold my breath for a little bit, but not very long. I guess I got to start. And then I start. And there's all these little tricks that I think, if you look at my blog, there's a bunch of posts. I have the post on starting on my next breath. I think that was an ink post. And then every time I figure something out, I post it. So what are your tricks? I think a lot of people look at someone like Schwarzenegger and they say, or Michael Jordan, and they say, well, Schwarzenegger just likes lifting weights. That's why he does it. He likes it. And so for me, it's really hard. I don't want to go to the gym. It's too difficult for me, but he likes it. No, it's just as hard for him as anybody else. That's why he's so inspirational, because he's worked through all these things that most people don't. I don't think it's easy for anyone. I think I haven't tested this out. I haven't done my big research thing, but I'm pretty sure. I bet most very successful people who do difficult things have little tricks to get them started, like start on the next inhalation. Or
that's interesting.
Most people I know who go to the gym, they don't say, I'm going to go to the gym for 2 hours. They say, I'm just going to walk in the front door. Once they're there, they'll stay for 2 hours. Or people go running. They say, they just put on their shoes. And then they'll go because their running shoes are on. But they don't think when they put on their shoes, this is the equivalent of starting running. They think, oh, I'll just do this little thing. And then once that, I'll kind of get started. So all these little things. Oh, and then I can probably, you might guess that if I figure out how to get burpees going, I can figure out how to do everything in life, because most things in life are easier to do than burpees. So that little trick applies all over the place. Just like people who meditate probably know that learning how to handle your emotions when you meditate teaches you how to handle your emotions when someone's bothering you and getting you annoyed, or when you're impatient. The same emotional skills that you learn from meditation apply throughout all of life. The same emotional skills that you learn in fitness exercises apply throughout life. And there's lots of little things like that.
And I'm definitely...
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry.
No worries.
There's a more recent... Oh, no, it's not the most recent one. The habit that I picked up before picking up a piece of trash every day was that I wake up in 1 minute every day. So my phone, which is my alarm clock, I put away from my bed. So my rule now is that when the alarm goes off, I have to wake up, get out of bed, make the bed, walk over and turn off the alarm before 1 minute has passed. And again, why did I do that one? Because I teach leadership, and it was one of my leadership students last year was trying to use my techniques to wake up sooner or wake up faster. And she was like, this is going to be really difficult. And I said, if you believe it's going to be difficult, that's all it takes to be difficult. But that's not because the thing is difficult. It's because your belief is, you're responding to your belief.
The mindset.
Yeah. And at the time, I was taking like sometimes half an hour to get up out of bed. And I thought, oh, it's a pretty useful exercise. I'll try it. I'm saying to her that if you believe it's easy, it's going to be easy. Let's give it a shot. And next thing I knew, the next morning, I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I did it. And then after a few months of it, it became tremendously valuable. My waking up with purpose is it's such an incredible way to start the day. So much better than, for me, so much better than lying in bed for a long time.
I could definitely agree with wanting to get out of bed much quicker, as I try and get up as early as possible, sometimes as early as 5 a.m. just to get the day started and do what I have to do. And when it comes to getting done what we have to get done, a lot of people, they set high goals for themselves, but they're not always able to tap into their full potential. So what do you believe holds most people back from reaching their full potential?
Oh, so many things. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is oftentimes community. If you have people around you, oh man, leadership class last semester, there was this one student who, I give people a SIDCHA, or I ask people to do a SIDCHA. So SIDCHA is my term for self-imposed, daily, challenging, healthy activity, SIDCHA. And she's doing planks. So her SIDCHA was to do, I don't know, it was like 30 seconds or a minute of planks every day. And she said that she lost 4.5 kilograms. So it's not a weight losing exercise. So how did she lose it? Because she developed discipline, and that was improving her life. Okay, sounds great, right? But her husband starts telling her, why are you doing that? What's the point? And her friends start saying, why do you keep doing this? It's not going to make a difference. Why are you bothering? Like, what terrible things for people to say.
It's a bad circle.
Yeah, and so I actually made it a classroom exercise of asking the rest of the students in the class, why would people say things like that to her? And it generated a very interesting class discussion because, in leadership, understanding people's emotions and motivations is very important. So I think the consensus was that people who are not fit but want to be fit, it's tough to sleep at night if you are not living by your values. So how do you resolve this conflict? Is one way to do it is to say it's impossible. And now if someone starts doing what you've convinced yourself is impossible, suddenly it's possible and your excuse goes away. And so it's easier, for most people, it's easier to get someone else to stop getting fit than it is for you to start being fit. Now what happened was she continued at it, and eventually the husband started jogging and they started changing their diet, and she led them through her own personal behavior. And that's what the class is about, learning leadership. And so community is a big piece of it. Beliefs, there's your environment, your beliefs, and your behavior. If you believe it's difficult, it becomes difficult. Henry Ford has that famous quote, if you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right. Something like that.
Yeah.
We have a pretty complacent society. And not just your family and friends that are close to you, but generally, this nation is something like 80% overweight and obese, and up hugely from decades ago. So it's not genetic. Whatever component is genetic, that's the same component that it was a few years ago or a decade or two ago. And yet the numbers are much higher. And then there's a lot of people saying that there's a set point or it's impossible to change, but that doesn't seem to be backed up by the science that I've come across. So it's like there's a lot of complacency, and it reinforces itself. Yeah, I don't know. I think people don't. I don't know. I mean, because in my life, the more that I work on my work ethic, it's not work on my work ethic. The more that I find that doing things improves my life more, that my life becomes more and more surrounded by people who are like that. And so even if the country is more and more complacent, and do you know how much TV the average American watches?
A lot. So 32 hours a week.
So 32 hours. Yeah, actually, that's pretty close. What I wrote was 5 hours a day. And African Americans, 7 hours a day. I'm like, 7 hours a day. Okay, sleep for 8, work for 8, that's 16. You got 8 left. That's 7 hours. You got 1 hour non-watching TV of your waking time. It's like, I can't believe that. I mean, I can believe it, but
that's a lot of TV
I think if you watch
time.
5 hours of TV, you're not going to have a pretty strong work ethic. I don't know. I mean, I don't try to help people. I've learned through painful experience. If someone doesn't want to be helped, it's not worth anyone's time for me to try to help them. I help people who display to me that they're doing something. They could use guidance. They could use someone to tell them how it's going, if it's going well or not. If they can use coaching, but not to start them from scratch. So I have the selection effect of people come to me who want to improve, and then it's not trivial, but I don't have to start them from scratch. I don't have to figure out why other people don't do it.
5 hours per day is definitely a lot of time. Some people spend all that time watching TV. Others are pursuing their dreams and pursuing bigger goals. So the way we use our time definitely has a big impact on what we're able to achieve. But regardless of how we use our time, challenges are an inevitable part of the journey. And Joshua, with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could share with us one big challenge you faced in your journey and a powerful lesson you learned during that challenge.
Oh man, I got to tell you, I got to answer a slightly different question first, because yesterday I posted on my podcast, and I hope it's okay if I talk about my podcast on your podcast.
Go for it.
I ask people, it's leadership in the environment, and I ask people what they care about in the environment, and I invite them to take on a personal challenge. And this guy whom he was a Division I wrestler, and now he's a coach, and Division I top 10, maybe top 5 in the country. And he took on a challenge, which was simply to take public transportation a bit more than driving. And when he started doing it, he realized it was taking more time away from his family than he was willing to give up, because he's got 4 kids and a wife. And most people at this point give up. They say, I gave it a shot. It was too much to do. Or, somehow it didn't work out. He does something different. He goes to his family and says, there's this challenge I've taken on. I really want to do it, but I also don't want it to take time away from you guys. Can we sit together and figure something out? So he makes this family exercise around the dinner table. And the 4 kids are piping in, and the wife is piping in of different things they could do. So instead of public transportation, he and his wife, the kids have to go to like gymnastics and sports and stuff. So they start carpooling instead, which has the effect of lowering the gas, but also building connections with the community. And the kids start figuring out all these things that they could do that maybe they should have done before, of like less packaging for their food and things like that. So he turns it into exactly what the problem was, he uses to solve. And I'm sure that this podcast is going to be one that I tell a lot of people to listen to, because it's this guy who's achieved a lot. And compared to wrestling, I think carpooling is a lot easier, and yet it was hard. And you hear him go through what the struggles were, how he takes what would be a problem for most and comes up with a solution. So you asked about a big problem for me, and this is a modest-sized problem for someone else, but you can hear in real time how he resolves this. Okay, so for me, a big challenge. By the way, I live across the street from a firehouse. I don't know if you can hear that every day they test their equipment, and it's really loud. So that's there.
Oh, wow.
Sorry.
I don't hear that on my end, luckily.
Okay, cool. So, I'm going to tell a story that I've told a few times. When I played Ultimate Frisbee undergrad, there was a time when it's my sophomore year, and we have this big game going on, and the first half happens, and I haven't played yet, and the second half happens, and we're like, the game's pretty close to being done, and I go up to the captain and I say, I haven't played yet, and he says, Josh, this is an important game. It's very close, and we really want to win this game. And I don't know how to say this, but every point counts. And when you're covering someone, he still gets the disc, and we can't have that right now. And up until that point, I just thought, I don't think I had a sense of what competition meant. And I just thought, show up to practice, show up to games, I should get to play. And I walked away and thought, well, this is a long time ago, and so I don't really remember the details. But I know that eventually I started, like, tears started welling up in my eyes, and my throat started getting that feeling when you're about to cry. And as a 18-year-old guy, I don't want to be crying on the sideline.
Right. And
so I leave and I head back to the vans, and then the tears start coming out. And it hits me that if I can either be someone who just shows up, and as long as I'm there, I'll get some playing time in the games that don't really count. But if I really want to play and be in the big games, then I'm going to have to do something different than what I'm doing now. I can't just feel entitled and just show up and think that that's enough. By the way, as I'm sitting there in the vans, there's a men's team and a women's team. And so I guess their game must have ended, because now they start coming back in the van. And now I'm like, oh, crap. Now I'm crying with the girls here. Yeah. So I had to, like, not cry. But the feeling was still there. And that was a big change in my life, because I realized that the most important things that I want would come through effort. And eventually I was captain of the team, and I was on a team that made nationals and on a team at Worlds. And, I wasn't the best player on those teams, but I was nationals caliber. And that was a major, major shift. I did not ask for that. I grew up, my family didn't really, the sense of competition and striving to reach your potential, learning what your potential was and striving to surpass it. At least not in an athletic sense, it wasn't there. And yeah, now that I think of it, maybe your questions earlier made me think of that. I've had a couple experiences like that in business, where I had to decide if I was going to go all in or not. But that was a big one. I'm sure there are other occasions like that, but that one, that's a pretty big one. I mean, there haven't been many times that I've cried from, movies, sure. Girls, that they'll bring tears. But yeah, it's not often that it's come from things that were so serious, or so meaningful, and got me so deep, so unexpectedly. So that was one of them.
And it is a really incredible transformation you were able to make from someone who, like, people on your team didn't even want on during a close game, to being one of the top players at nationals caliber. I feel like with any type of goal, those types of transformations are really inspiring. Like, the mentality you had to have can be connected to, like, blogging or podcasting or anything. So I would greatly appreciate if you could go a little deeper into how that transformation happened.
Oh man, I mean, so if that was sophomore year, that would be 1989 or maybe 1990. We're 2017. That's pretty far back. I mean, so what did I do to get better? I mean, I got really serious about playing. I mean, it was, how can I say it? You want to get better. You want to improve your cardiovascular. You want to improve your strength. You want to improve your teamwork and things like that. I mean, you just want to work. You don't miss practice. There was a time later where we had a practice, and it was like an early morning practice because everyone's schedules are different. And it must have been like December or something, and like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. we meet in the middle of campus. We're going to head down to Central Park to play there. And it was so cold. Everyone showed up. And we're all actually pretty scared to play because it's like you're going to injure yourself, like seriously injure yourself with the ground that hard, and the Frisbee, it's going to hurt every time you catch it. And we got there, and our coach was already there, and he was just like, guys, you guys are crazy. Go back to sleep. We're not having practice today. But having teammates like that, I wouldn't trade that for anything. I mean, and I don't know, it's so far ago. But I'll tell you something that hit me recently is that about a year ago, this country elected someone who I think he's more interested in plundering than protecting the environment. And I think I prefer protecting the environment. And I'm doing a lot of things. I'm trying to do a lot of things, not just I'd already been doing a lot of things to lower my impact on the environment. I'm sitting here, it's like 30 degrees outside of New York, maybe in the 20s, and I'm wearing a sweater and all these layers because I don't have the heat on, because my apartment, it gets cool. It's definitely colder than normal, but I don't really need the heat on. I'm pretty comfortable, but I'm, layered. But I want to start doing things leadership related. And, the burpees and all the discipline stuff it all feeds into doing what I want to do, doing what I feel is best, living by my values. So environment is a big value of mine. Leadership, having an effect, is a big thing. And I've been watching a bunch of Muhammad Ali movies and documentaries recently, and I look at what he does, and like people say, wow, 100,000 burpees, that's so much. I look at Muhammad Ali, and I'm like, it's so little. I mean, do you ever hear the question of, like, people asked him how many crunches he did every day?
I've not heard that.
So he says, I don't know, because I don't start counting until they hurt. And I'm not anywhere close to that. Now, I'm not trying to be the heavyweight champion of the world, and I'm older now than he was in his prime. But still, it's like you got to set your minimum levels of what's acceptable and make your peers people that you want to pick, your role models and live with them. Muhammad Ali, if that, for me, he's a big one for me. And Nelson Mandela is another big one. I mean, he was in jail for 27 years. And on the day of his release, quite a busy day, you can imagine. I mean, the entire world is like looking for this. And he wakes up and he does his daily exercises. That's the first thing he did that day, as busy as it was. Same with Gandhi. When he was told at some point, like, this is a really busy day, you don't have time for all your meditation. He's like, well, then I must meditate more. It's I have this video that I showed in class of Phil Jackson coaching. He's talking about Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, but at this point he's talking about coaching Shaquille. And he wants to get Shaquille to get in shape. He doesn't tell Shaquille, get in shape. He talks to Shaquille about Wilt Chamberlain, how great Wilt Chamberlain was, and how Wilt Chamberlain played every minute of every game. And now Shaquille, he wants to compete against the other team, but he also wants to compete against Wilt Chamberlain. So now he has to do what Wilt Chamberlain did. And then that year he became the MVP. And that's a big piece of it. It's like, who do you want to live like? The people around you, if they're great, great. But to me, I pick historical people that I want to emulate and use them as role models. And I try to put myself in their world. Like when I was writing my book, I'm thinking about like Plato and Aristotle. I want to follow in their footsteps. And I believe that my book is that valuable. I think that it's something that if people read it and do the exercises in it, that they will be able to change their lives in the way that I imagine Plato and Aristotle were trying to enable people to do as well. I say this is kind of general. If you really want very specific stuff, then that's what the book is about. The book is like gives the exercise. I specifically made exercises that will create the results in anyone that came out in me. So if you want to lead people and you want to lead yourself and you want to have a lot of self-awareness and resilience and things like that, then those are the specific exercises.
And we bring the topic of books up. You mentioned that you wrote your book with a very clear intention of modeling the people who you've come to admire. And I'm wondering, in addition to your book, if you could share 3 other book recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, the two quick ones that come off the bat, I was just talking about Nelson Mandela, and his autobiography was just, for me, he's an ordinary man, no special abilities. He's not superhuman. And he negotiates with the president of a country from prison to become president himself. That's very rare. And you get to see the man himself. And so that's a big one. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl is about a man who lived through Auschwitz and was able in Auschwitz to find meaning and purpose in life, and is a tremendous touchstone for me, because anytime in my life I can say, well, Viktor Frankl was tortured by the Nazis and found meaning. Is my situation worse than that? And so far, I haven't been in a situation worse than being tortured by Nazis.
His story's deep.
And so if he's able to do it, and he's no more or less human than I am, then I can do it. And so it puts a lot of things into perspective. So for a third one, I'm just going to pick one that I'm happy to be really into right now. And I don't think it'll stand the test of time on the scale of those books, but it's called Affluence Without Abundance. And I'm holding it in my hand now, Affluence Without Abundance, The Disappearing World of the Bushmen. And it's this guy who studies the hunting and gathering communities and lived with them for decades in Southern Africa. And the affluence is living a good life, of enjoying life, enjoying community. They work like 10 hours, 15 hours a week, and they have everything they need. And here we are, we claim our society is so modern and so great. And we're all taking drugs, and we're all depressed, and they're not. And we think that, like, these societies have lived basically that way. Like, you think maybe America hasn't been around that long, so maybe some countries have been around for hundreds of years. These cultures have been this way for 200,000 years. Like, it's not even comprehensible on the scale of how we live. And farming is more efficient, and therefore culturally it wins out. But it's brutal, and it like tramples over the rights of everyone, and like we're very invasive, and they're not. And they're all, I mean, we're taking away their land and extincting all the animals that they live off of. But we have so much to learn from them. So that's a big one. It's changing a lot of views of how I look at society. I've been vegetarian since 1990, and I still won't eat meat because of factory farming. But the way that they live in relation to the animals around them is very different views of things like that. So sorry if I'm talking for too long about it. But I recommend that book.
And it definitely is an important topic of discussion. And I do appreciate you sharing all 3 of those books, each of them powerful in their own way, whether it be autobiography or something that tackles an entirely new to us way of life. All 3 of those books are definitely really important. And before we close out, though, I would like to flip the stage in a sense. So I've asked you several questions throughout our time together, but what is one question that you believe we need to be asking ourselves more often?
Well, there's a question that a lot of people say, what do you do for a living? Or where are you from, when they're doing their small talk, which is designed, people don't usually start off with talking about religion or politics because they know people care about that stuff and arguments begin. So what do you do for a living? Where are you from? How many brothers and sisters do you have? Where did you go to college? That stuff is designed it's designed to be stuff that people don't care about so that you don't get into arguments. I like to start with what's your passion. And more important actually than the first question is how you follow it up. Because usually when you say what's your passion, people will give you some, movies, books, cooking, or something there's like a lot of usual habits that people have. The next thing to do is to follow up and show, not to ask why or to ask more, but to support them. And I mean, my book talks about this. And it's how do you support whatever they answer, support them so that they feel comfortable sharing more, and then people will open up more. And if you have someone ask you these questions, like what's a passion of yours, and then ask you, and then give you a chance to elaborate so that you know that you'll be supported and not be judged, you'll find out things about yourself that you didn't know. So it's more important than the questions of the follow-up is, so it's, if you had asked what's something important to communicate to each other, it's to support people in things that matter to them so that they can share these things and open up about them. Then you learn something about them, they learn something about themselves, and hopefully they'll do it back with you, and you can learn something about yourself, and they can learn more about you. And that's intimacy. That's connection. It's a meaningful connection.
I really like that approach of not just asking the same common questions, but to ask questions that go a little deeper, as you mentioned. And those are definitely some really good questions we should ask people when we are in those types of conversations. And Joshua, I'm very appreciative of all the time you spent having a conversation with me and sharing Breakthrough Success listeners all these great insights. For anyone wondering, the show notes are at markgilberti.com/E98. The links will be there as well. But to learn more about Joshua, you can read any of his blog posts and head over to the Spodek Academy to basically get a lot of learning in about leadership and being able to take your life to the next level. Breakthrough Success listeners, I need your help to keep this show running. I choose not to use sponsored ads in my episodes to provide you with a better experience. However, this decision gives me little money to pay for storage in my team, which comes over to over $1,000 per month. So please consider supporting the Breakthrough Success podcast on Patreon by heading over to patreon.com/markgilberti. For as little as $1 per month, you can help Breakthrough Success stay running while taking advantage of exclusive content and other perks that come with being a patron. To help support Breakthrough Success, head over to patreon.com/markgilberti or search for Breakthrough Success on Patreon. That way, I can maintain the Breakthrough Success podcast so it stays running and provide